Okay, so we're recording. So thank you, everyone. Welcome to September 22nd, well, September 2nd, 22nd for 2020, the OWASP board meeting. With attendance, we have myself, Sharif Mansour, Grant Ogners, Richard Greenberg, Gary Robinson, Vandana Verma, and Martin. And yeah, with that, the first call of order is approval of last month's meeting minutes.
Okay, let me just get those on screen.
Right.
Can I have okay.
I second it.
So you motioned?
Thank you. So I was going to say, Andrew, you were supposed to share the meeting minutes. Yeah. Okay. So motions to approve the August 25th, 2020 meeting minutes. Can I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. So in order that I see, folks, Gary?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Vandana?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
And yes for myself.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. The sharing tab is right where I've got the tabs. So give me one sec. Sorry for the choppiness. Okay, next.
Okay, so next we have the reports from the foundation. So Andrew, can you walk us through those?
Yep, we likely have, in fact we do, legal counsel is here to report on the status of the contractual review and the bylaws review. I'm just going to, for simplicity and to get that out of the road as quickly as possible, I'd like to just simply refer to and see if the chair can recognize Arnold Brown from our law firm.
Okay, recognize.
Hey, Arnold.
Hi there. Hi, I'm Arnold Brown. Hi, I'm from Schwalbe, Williamson and Wyatt, and I've been working with Andrew and Mike on contract review. It's nice to meet all of you. Yeah, we've reviewed a number of the contracts and started to conduct a review of the bylaws. Sort of the first order of business is to kind of go through the agreements and find anything that should be added, for example, the use of the registered trademark in the agreements, simple things of that nature. But then we moved on and dealt with some of the substantive things. Hi, Tom. I see you on chat there. Yeah, and so yeah, and I don't think one of the big things that we actually noticed was, for example, there is no antitrust policy for the group, and that's one thing that we want to talk to the board or Andrew about, is how the group decided that that wasn't something needed. Now, if there isn't a policy, we would suggest adding something to either the corporate membership agreement or the bylaws that would at least address that topic. Other big picture issues we found were, depending on the output of this organization, what I've been able to see from the website, there may be a need to also mention export control rules. There's been kind of an increased attention in technical alliances and membership groups with regards to export control and making sure that they're following all the rules. There's been in the U.S. a lot of attention to exports to certain Chinese companies that are on something called the entity list. So there's this increased attention there. But in conjunction with this review of the agreements, I think it'd be the appropriate time to address that issue. So those are some of the big picture issues that we found. And with regards to some of the event agreements, we've added things related to force majeure and the pandemic. So a lot of groups that have events and promotion, sponsorship agreements have added those terms, and so we added them to your agreements as well. Yeah, and those are kind of the big picture issues. I mean, on an agreement by agreement basis, hopefully as they circulate to the board, you'll give us feedback and we'll complete that turn of all the documents. And we look forward to getting to know the organization better and understanding how we can be of help to on the governance side, as well as things like antitrust and export control and things of that nature that tend to come up in these groups, and tax exempt status and things like that. Any questions? I don't want to take too much of the time in the meeting.
I had two hopefully quick questions. The first one is with regards to export rules. So we build open source software and also open documentation to all. Mm-hmm. How does the export rules apply there? That's
a great question. So open source is not covered under the US EAR, and so open source software is not an issue. With the caveat that what we look for with open source software is there any period before the software is made available to the public where it's in a review cycle that's essentially not public yet, and who is participating in that? Because that would actually be a deemed export if it's not covered by the the exception for open source. The other thing that we look at is the documentation around like if there's sometimes there's like reference design documentation or other materials that relate to open source. Maybe in this case there isn't. And the third thing another thing we look at is whether or not there's encryption included in the open source. It could give rise to an additional obligation, like we had in another group where there was an obligation to give a notice to the Bureau of Information and Security in the U.S. as well as NSA. So those are some things to think about with regards to open source and export control.
So we have about 200 projects. We don't have a review process. We don't know if it contains encryption. I would imagine ESAPI, one of our key projects, actually does. What would you suggest that we do? I mean, essentially, we're an open source community where people can start projects on their own, and we don't have any review controls before it's released. Is it just on best efforts basis, or how would we actually be able to manage this? Because otherwise we'd have to turn our community into closed, which is diametrically opposed to where we are.
Yeah, I think there's two things to think about. One could be a certification process during the submittal, or just it's a notice that when they join that repository or something to that effect, they're agreeing that anything they commit to the repository is going to be free from encryption that would give rise to this export control obligation. Now, how effective is that to protect the organization against if it did end up containing encryption, and OWASP is the organization that's releasing the code, then that could still be an issue. But at least it mitigates the problem, and and hopefully reduces the chance that it would be in the code. The other thing you could do is sorry.
Basically, to provide protection of data, both in transit and in processing and in storage, we strongly encourage the use of encryption. So we might need to discuss this one offline, I think.
Yep.
Sounds
Andrew,
complicated.
Okay.
is it
I
the
see.
user encryption? We don't develop encryption, right?
Yeah, we
just
don't roll our own. We just use other open source encryption. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Let's talk about
Exactly.
this offline. I think this is a
Yeah,
complicated topic.
references.
Yeah.
Let's get very technical very quickly. Let's
That's
move
right.
on.
It
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
Okay.
And we can, you know what? I think maybe the first step would be we'll just send you some information about encryption in open source, and then start the conversation from there.
On the antitrust
Thank you.
policy you mentioned, I'm not sure if I'm not an expert here at all, but how does that tangentize into OWASP for our antitrust protections?
Yeah, even open source projects are subject to the antitrust provisions. There's no exception for open source activity. There have been cases where groups that are open source groups have been in violation of antitrust rules. So this is something that's come up before. So anytime you have competitors that are getting together to do anything, you've got to be careful about the antitrust rules, and just putting in place a set of guidelines, the do's and don'ts, is the bare minimum. And the Department of Justice in the US has said, any group that has competitors coming together, if you don't have these basic guidelines of what to do and not do, then you're incurring a lot of risk. So yeah, and there's a lot of best practices about, what you should do. Now, one of the things simple thing is that a notice, before, large gatherings, the meetings of the organization, about, antitrust and, complying with that. Just discussions about, the market, prices, costs, implementations, that kind of discussion should be avoided, because even discussions could be violations of the antitrust rules. You don't have to collude, basically, to have it be a violation of the antitrust rule. You just have to have the impact affect the competitive market negatively, and then it would be a violation.
So does that include our directors having shares in some of these companies? Because I must admit, I think some of us hold shares in firms that are also sponsors.
You mean, does the position of the directors, does it sweep in the interest of, whatever company they hold shares in? Let me give that some thought. But essentially, if you're representing a company, you're deemed to be one of those actors, right? Like a competitor. If you own shares, but you're not an employee or contractor of that company, I'm not so sure. But even individuals, shouldn't be essentially talking about, the prohibited things, right? Like, the pricing in the market, what territories different companies are going to go after. These are kind of things that tend to get people in trouble. So even if you really weren't a part of a corporation, but you ended up kind of acting on their behalf or engaging in any of that discussion that's prohibited, it still wouldn't be a good thing.
So folks, I do actually have—
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I do actually have a list of all of the documents that have been shared with us. I will share them one at a time in discussion threads on the global border list so you can review. It's my view that, I've already used the MOU one that came back to work with Payer2, and it was an immense improvement from where we were. So this has been an incredibly valuable experience. We are not legal professionals, and I think, our best intentions are to protect ourselves, and I think providing qualified legal advice in these instances has been very valuable.
Oh, great. Glad to hear that, Andrew.
Yeah. Thank you, Arnold, and thank you, Andrew, for doing this.
Yep. One last thing is that I have been discussing retaining legal counsel for the board. This is in relation to after the September meeting, sorry, the August special meeting. I obviously have a sense from the board that may not necessarily be what you're interested in right now. I would encourage you to do the board training that we're going to be doing and then come back and revisit that, that concept, because I think it'll be incredibly valuable for you to have independent legal advice available to you during board meetings.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Arnold. Very much appreciated.
Okay, and if I'm not,
okay, sorry.
Thank you very much. And if I'm not needed, I can excuse myself, or would you like me to stay around?
No, I think it's probably best if it's going to get boring from here on. We're just going to be talking about our
Okay.
reports and things. So, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Nice to meet you. All right, take care.
Thank you.
No worries.
Take care.
Since I've already started, I'll just continue on and then I'll let Tom talk. Essentially, we've got a lot of things going on at the moment. The Board of Directors election is underway. Dawn is here if you want to ask her any questions in relation to that. We obviously had a complimentary membership discussion in our face-to-face. I am committing to work with Grant to come up with a policy for you to approve at the October board meeting. The other one is essentially the APSEC virtual organisation is well underway. You'll see a discussion item for this. Emily has some slides for you to look at. The operating plan is below. I did finalise it this morning and I apologise for having that done so late. In fact, there's been a few changes, not to the agenda so much, but certainly to the reading materials. So I do apologise if you've not had a chance to read it. It's the same document that you've seen. It's just completed essentially what has happened. We've done the face-to-face. That was incredibly valuable. I really appreciate you coming and spending your personal time with me. That was probably the best face-to-face that I've ever been a part of. We've got through so much material and it's going to really help us set the course for the future. So thank you. I look forward to the next one in January so we can actually do a full strategy review. The Policy Review Committee has addressed many of the comments and there are 3 policies which are below. You've actually seen them and many of you commented that you like them. So I've put a motion in. This is about the only additional motion for today to approve them. And if so, we'll get those up. We're going to be deprecating PayPal. We're also looking at, and I'll talk, you can ask Tom about this. We've had so many problems with ING running our European bank account. I've asked Tom to look into alternative banks. It turns out Citizens can run a Euro account on our behalf. I would encourage you to ask him questions. I mean, this is an operational matter, but fundamentally we cannot continue with ING. Every time we get the right people on, they get blocked. Martin is currently blocked. Every time we try to do a transfer, they're often blocked, and that results in the account getting blocked. And they're just completely unresponsive. And you heard on the weekend from Martin that he's been trying to get back on. So we'll probably be doing something about that before the end of the year. But again, I'll leave that to a discussion with Tom. Are there any questions about those 2 items?
I had one question. Weren't we looking at TransferWise at some point, especially for money transfers?
So this is Sharif, Tom. Yes, and I'm pretty sure I'd have to check with accounting that we set it up, but that's not an actual bank. TransferWise is just a money transferring house. Actually, there's a couple of options regarding that, but that was part of, I have 4 things to go over other than just the financials, and that was one of them.
Yeah, so I'll let Tom talk about that one.
Just one question.
Yes.
As the European account, it's a separate entity.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any problems, implications about that?
I don't believe so, no. Entities, the difference between the bank and the entity exists independently of the bank. So we can have the bank wherever. It'll be the same as this US foundation holding an EU bank account, which is what we're roughly doing. The thing that we would like to do is centralize our banking operations in one single bank. And we're looking into options. And I'll let Tom talk about that. If Citizens can do it, we've got full access to Citizens as the moment, including 2-factor authentication to protect us, as well as initiator approver. So if it's the easiest pathway forward, I would suggest we go down that pathway.
Yeah, but I mean that the European entity is also existing as an independent entity.
Yes.
And I think they are currently owner of the bank account, right?
Yes, and so you'll see in the operating plan, I've changed the decommission that entity to review that entity and try and improve things. One of the items in here is to actually fix the banking situation.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Andrew, I wanted to actually ask you something that I was hoping that you bring up at the top of the hour, which is the metrics, specifically on the site traffic. I do recall that last time there was a dip for the way that Google Analytics worked and so forth, and there was an increase of 65%. Can you just comment on that? What was investigated and what was found?
Honestly, it might be seasonal. It might be related to the thing. We're back to our normal set. I mean, this is a number that if you take away people who've opted out of cookies, this number of 521,000 seems to be back in order. It seems like there was a problem with the Google Analytics during the July period, whether people were on holidays, whether people were not accepting it in particular that month. Maybe there was a browser change that prevented that from going through, like Firefox says, do not track and protections turned on by default. Maybe there's a new release of Chrome that did the same. We don't know. All I do know is that using the same methodology that we've used for months, our website traffic is back up.
Okay.
Okay. So we've had a very slight decrease in membership. Certainly not something to be concerned about. It's not statistically significant at this point. In terms of year to net income, I'll let Tom talk about those. I think it's much better to actually hear from Tom on that one. The last thing that I want to just bring to your attention before we finish up my report is just regional events. We're going to be holding education sessions for chapter leaders and others, because everyone will have access to creating events soon. We need people to actually run through and get events approved. It's dead simple right now. It's actually easier than it's ever been to get an event approved. And yet we still contain having problems getting people to get the event approved before they start opening call for papers and call for training and taking sponsorships. People aren't allowed to take sponsorships without us because we need financial transparency. We can also provide them sponsorships if only we knew. And in fact, with OWASP Africa, which held recently, they nearly didn't have a 760-person event because they didn't have access to Zoom and they had no money to pay for it. So we provided it, of course. And if we'd known about it, they could have actually had some additional sponsors and it earned a lot more money than they did. This is helping spread the mission, and we really need people to actually comply with this. So as much as I want to do an education campaign and really help people understand the reasons why we want them to go through us, the reality is that we'll also be cancelling events who aren't compliant. And at the moment, AppSec Indonesia, which has been hopefully hosted by the Jakarta chapter, is in very strong danger of being cancelled altogether, just due to extreme non-compliance. So, I mean, the gentleman is, as far as I can tell, he's taking registrations and donations into his personal PayPal, and we just cannot have that. It's not okay. It's against our corporate policy. Okay, Tom, sorry, are there any questions before I hand on to Tom?
No, thank you, Andrew.
No worries, Tom.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrew.
Oh. Anybody have a question? Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you, Andrew, for putting up the narrative and the financials. I'll touch on them briefly. You know, we're still holding. We're a little bit ahead of budget from a net income perspective, about 23,000 from where we thought we would be, based on, you know, the actual budget for 4 months and then the Z forecast that was approved. You know, we're a little short in revenue, and that's more or less due to donations, because we're over in conference and under in membership by just about the same. Expenses are holding. We're under in expenses by more than we're under in revenue, which is why we're showing a positive variance to our net income. You know, the couple of things that stand out, the professional fees, you know, the audit wasn't factored in the legal fees, but everything else is more or less, well, is more than offsetting the couple of accounts that are over. You know, we had 1.3 million in the bank at the end of August. I'll touch briefly on the ING right now. We didn't we didn't have access to it. Not that there's been a lot of activity the last few months. So I had to close the books without reconciling the ING accounts because we don't have access to the statements right now. Hopefully we can get that rectified. But that's where we are from a financial perspective against our budgets. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, not hearing any, please feel free to reach out. You know, if you have a chance to look at these and you have any questions, I'm always available. Andrew did bring up, you know, the current status with ING. I reached out to the Treasury VP that's assigned to us for Citizens. We actually have 2 VPs assigned to us because we have so many accounts with Citizens. They do have multi-currency bank account options. I'm meeting with them at 2 o'clock, a little after this call this afternoon to get more information on it. So stay tuned. If we can do it, Martin, to your question about OWASP VZW being a separate entity, I will check with the CPA. What I do know is if we have complete control over that account, we'll have to note it in our 990 that we have control of a foreign bank account. But that's the only issue that I see, is just noting it in the 990. So I'll keep everybody abreast of that. Speaking of the audit in the 990, I met with the CPA last week. The audit's going along smoothly. I'm expecting a draft. He's promised to have it either at the end of this week or the very beginning of next week. The only issue we had was regarding recognition of membership dues. And I think we've resolved that. And the way it's being resolved is for the $50 membership dues, where the members, there's not a lot of tangible benefits that go along with it. It looks like they're going to allow us to recognize those like we always have when they come in as unrestricted contributions. So we don't have to defer memberships that cross fiscal years. So if anything changes with that, I'll let you all know, but I haven't heard anything since last week when he was going to check with the partner, and the partner hasn't reached out to me either. So I'm expecting, you know, the first draft of the audit, which I'll go over with, you know, with Andrew and Vandana and Mike as soon as we get it, but I haven't heard of any other issues. So, you know, the audits, this is now the 3rd one we've gone through. They seem to be going smoother, which is a good thing. Let's see what else. So we also got a VAT certificate. Harold needed one for a vendor. So the CPA in Belgium was able to provide us with that. And we also, the IRS apparently is caught up. We've got the certificates of residency, which, you know, some of our vendors and sponsors require. So we have those. So if Kelly or anybody else needs one, just let us know. But they arrived a week or so ago. So we have those to be able to provide. It was just a little slow at the IRS with everything that's going on. Also, so the last piece is the 990. Once the audit is done and we sign the representation letter, they'll give us a draft of the 990, which is due on November 15th. So we're really in good shape to have that all cleaned up and done and signed off on by the middle of November. I mean, by the middle of October. So we make the November 15th deadline. With that, I'll take any questions.
So I just want to point out that now, today we're hopefully approving the operational plan. I'll get a calendar of events and work with Tom on a new budget. Tom is actually taking the initiative. We had a meeting on Monday. He's going to get a draft ready, and we're going to start drafting that budget throughout October for a November approval. I'm going to be reaching out to all the committees, because if the committee's policy is approved today, they will have access to a budget, and I want them to be formally setting up a program of works that they're going to commit to, and therefore they could be able to ask for a formal budget, which you'll be able to review. The other thing is that our expense policy currently does not have a cutoff in terms of number of days. I have had to deny a expense claim for Dublin, which was not submitted last year. Now, if the board wishes to pay that, then essentially let me know and I'll bring that to an e-vote. But fundamentally, I'd like to restrict the expense policy to 60 days. Essentially, if you haven't submitted an expense claim within 60 days, it's not going to get paid. I don't think it's documented at the moment, and the expense policy is due for a renewal soon as part of the operating plan. So I'll happily take any offline, like with Vandana and I have talked about the Dublin one, and I have rejected it. However, if the board chooses to pay it, then that is something that you can take up with either myself or Vandana, but I would think it's within my operational capacity to say no, it's been too long. Is there any problems with the 60-day expense limit? Okay, good, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. So on with the votes that have taken place out of band. So the first one was the motion to endorse temporary suspension of a member by the executive director. The motion had passed 6-0, with myself being out sick as absent. The second motion was for Josh Sokol for honorary membership. That has also passed with 4
no.
members yes.
Actually, I failed to get a sponsor in a second. So if the vote could be actually approved with a sponsor in a second, I am so sorry. I'm not allowed to table the motions without a sponsor or a second.
Which one are you referring to, Josh's?
Yes.
The honorary membership, yeah.
All right, I'll sponsor that one.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Excuse me, who seconded?
Granted.
Grant.
Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, we'll process Josh's honorary membership. I know that Grant and Martin had questions, and I must admit I didn't read the emails very carefully, and I failed to answer your basic questions, so I've put it in the background there. Based upon his past history and massive contributions to the community, he more than meets the written criteria for honorary membership in a way that many of the honorary members that we've actually passed this year have not. So I thank the board for admitting Josh. Now, admittedly, the reason why I wanted Josh to be an honorary member was to allow him to contribute to the policy review process, but if we've got other reforms coming up, such as complementary membership, this might be resolved in a different way. But I do believe Josh deserves honorary membership for his contributions and not just because he's going to help us get the regional event reform across the line. So thank you so much to the board for approving that.
So Andrew, yeah, so for the new business, and actually that references also the previous vote, I do want us to get to the point that anything that lands onto the board's under the board meeting does have at least a sponsor. But that's fine for now. So we'll go through each of the motion. We'll ask if there would be a sponsor for the motion, and then we'll go through for discussion and vote. So the first one, sorry, Dawn?
Are you accepting the Josh votes as is, or are you re-voting since it didn't have a sponsor? I got a little confused, I'm sorry.
We were accepting it as is. I think for the Robert rules of motion, I think we can do this really quick. We can re-vote, but so hold on. So Andrew, so that we don't go through another issue with the voting, and I really don't want us to, do we need to basically run a re-vote, given that there wasn't a sponsor or a second for that one? And we can fix this really quick, or can we move on given that the board has already voted via email?
Can we discuss the next motion, and I'll get you an answer from the Robert's Rules of Order. I think the answer is going to be we're going to have to just reconfirm our vote, but let me find out.
Okay. So the first one is motion to operationalize temporary infractions of Code of Conduct.
Yeah, sorry.
So do we have a sponsor for this motion?
I can sponsor.
Okay. And do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. So the motion is, it is resolved that the foundation shall draw up a policy to operationalize rapid, escalating, and time-limited responses to continued breaches of the OWASP Code of Conduct by participants and members. If the behavior is continuous, lawful, unlawful, or egregious, the policy should refer to and rely upon the existing bylaw governing the board's power to revoke membership. So open this to discussion. Does anyone have any questions with regards to this motion?
No.
So Andrew, I do have one. How does this impact sort of the compliance committee?
It is my proposal that I'll be working with someone such as one of the board members, such as Grant or yourself, to actually come up with a process that if I do this, it then gets immediately referred to the compliance committee if it's within their scope. The compliance committee scope at the moment is generally the members and the code of conduct. It is not necessarily every single element. If it's not the compliance committee's scope, then I'll have to go to refer to the next board meeting. It is my proposal that we do it for no more than 30 days because we hold monthly board meetings, and therefore the board can make a final decision at that next board meeting. The only problem that I foresee is we haven't documented any of the, like, is it 1 day? Is it 7 days? Is it 30 days? That's some of the detail that needs to be worked out. And I felt that it was important to get a sense from the board that they wish to make this permanent and to put a cap on it and make sure there's a process that's fair to the people being disciplined.
Okay.
I think that, somewhat parallel to this, I think we need to have an additional member, at least, to the compliance committee. If we have something in writing that gives it more teeth, it's unfair to have just 2 people. I used to be part of that, Martin also. It's a lot of work. So, we would reach out to the community and see if others are interested.
We've discussed the complications around staffing that committee, and they serve a critical role, and we do need to make sure that people are available to help in that regard. Andrew, if we put in wording around that you have the operational ability as the ED to deal with conflicts or code of conduct violations, and that we as a board at the next board meeting need to confirm that that stance, that might be the best way to do it.
I think that's the fairest way, because at the moment the bylaws don't give me any power to do such a thing, and I do believe very strongly in natural justice. It's important that if someone is disciplined, they have an appeals mechanism, such as the compliance committee, but also that the final vote, at the moment, the bylaws only contemplate the board making those decisions in section 503. So providing me a temporary measure that then ends up with a pathway for appeals and relations for a final decision to be held by the people who currently hold that authority. I believe the board has the oversight authority that's, I don't want to undermine that.
Agreed, but by the same token, we don't have to wait till the next board meeting to take action.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is why this exists.
Yeah. And that's why I'm suggesting that I can take action, but I need to be able to justify it. And then there's a process where it gets escalated. So there's not just me, taking action against 30 or 40 members that I don't like. I may not be the executive director forever, and you need to protect for an evergreen policy, as Mike says. We need to have a policy that contemplates, not only good intention, but it protects against bad intention as well.
Yeah, well, that any procedure like this here, the policy, I'm assuming, is going to have the right to appeal, so that would be timely enough for the next board meeting or whatever that's going to be.
Yep. And there should be a way of redeeming, like, for example, if a membership is, if it's found not to be the case, the membership should be extended and that sort of thing. So there's not harm during that time. there's special edge cases such as can a board member who's disciplined. I honestly think that may be out of my scope in this instance. I think that might be for the board to deal with themselves rather than me trying to discipline a board member, because effectively you're my bosses and that doesn't seem right.
So just one question about this. It does say about example, removing somebody's membership. Is there any scenarios, and I'm asking for opinions here, is there any scenarios where this would apply to non-members, people who are generally causing bad things on the internet that are not members, and maybe we can do nothing about it anyway?
You cannot revoke a non-member's membership, but you can kind of, but we have one who actually wasn't allowed to contribute to OWASP, so you can say this is an person non grata, so you're not allowed to speak or whatever name of, yeah.
So what I would suggest here is there isn't actually something to vote on. How about we table this, and the people who wish to work on this with me over the next month, we work together to come up with a policy that you all find agreeable, and we can bring it to the board for the October board meeting.
Great. Makes sense.
Okay, well, I can't actually ask for something to be tabled. Sharif?
So, yeah, call to, can I get a second for a call to table this motion?
Seconded.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, I have a answer for you on the previous issue. Section 1054 is a motion to ratify or approve or confirm. All you need to do is actually take a majority vote to confirm the previous vote that is held. So it's literally along the lines of, it is resolved that the previous e-vote is confirmed.
Okay, so it stands as is, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And just a simple majority will get it through.
Which it already has, so.
Are you saying, Andrew, that it needs to take another vote now?
Yeah, let me just type in.
Okay.
Do you want to just have something typed in so you've got something to approve for the minutes?
No, I think it's pretty simple. I mean, I think we can just run another vote with the same, you know, with the same result and move on. So I'll just put in call to run a vote with the sponsor and the second for this motion. So I'll start again. So can I have a sponsor for Josh's honorary membership? I'll sponsor.
I'll sponsor. Oh, all right. I'll second it.
Thank you, Richard. Okay.
I'm sorry, they
Sorry,
spoke
Vanda?
the same. I'm sorry, Sharif. Who was the first person who's going to sponsor
I was
it?
the sponsor. I was the
Okay.
sponsor. Richard is the
Thank you.
person second. Okay, so by the order of on the list here. So Vandana,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Owen is absent. Myself, I'll continue as abstain. Martin.
No.
Okay. All right. The motion has passed. No, the honorary vote has passed, and we can continue.
Okay, thank you.
So the next is with regards to the 3 policies for donations, conferences, and global events. So those have gone for 30 days. It's gone through the policy review process. Before I continue, does anyone have an issue for us? Let's rephrase it this way. Would you like us to run a vote for all 3 of them or individually? Does anyone have any currently any major issues with the policies as they stand, if you've reviewed them?
I think we should go separately because we should check on these policies separately. These are 3 different items. Global events team, donations, everything like don't go together. So we should take it separately.
I think Sharif's point was that we already discussed these in our meetings, and unless somebody has an issue, it just expedite the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and this is why I was bringing it up, because, for example, I had quite a lot of feedback, for example, on the no donation side. I know that my concerns were addressed. So, and I don't have necessarily any issues with the other policies, but if there's a board member that wants to discuss the policy specifically right now, it sort of makes sense to do it separately. But if we have, for the most part, consensus, we can vote all of them together.
I'm happy with all three.
Same.
Okay, anyone? And it's okay to say no, but anyone having any issues there? Okay, all right, so sort of motion to resolve that the following three policies are approved, which would have completed the policy review process. The foundation shall upload them within 30 days of this vote. So I will sponsor. Can I have a second?
I'll
I will
second.
have a second.
Okay, I think Richard beat you to the race there, Vandana. So over you, Richard. All right. Okay, so let's go through the order. See everyone. So Grant.
Approve.
Just in terms of the discussion here, and it's not a big issue, but the diff was quite hard to read. Just FYI.
Yeah,
It's a
the
changed
policies
version.
exist in, yeah, the policies exist as like work in progress, but this just, the links just happen to be as the diffs. Yeah. Okay, so starting from Grant.
Approve.
Okay. Gary,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Vandana,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
and approve for myself as well.
Thank you.
Given as we're reviewing diffs, I wish I had a looks good to me emoticon to publish.
Okay, let me just get the next one up on the screen. So this policy, I think you've all had a chance to read it, but the current policy does not actually grant committees the rights to have a budget, except for if you decide to approve an ad hoc one, which we have had in the past, but also that it didn't have access to travel, the ability to actually have grants or any sort of transparency or meeting requirements. And as we devolve activities, we need to have a little bylaw change just simply to contemplate allowing standing committees, which is what we're trying to form here, have the rights to have some of your overview in terms of strategy per the scope. At the moment, they're not allowed to do that. The Committees 2.0 document, as it stands, does not actually devolve strategy or governance of their little area to them. And so we need to actually provide that. So there's a revised policy. The revised policy is a lot cleaner. It doesn't have a lot of informational text. Let me just bring it up on screen so you can actually see. Oh, come on. Why won't it let me do that? Mouse, any mouse in a storm? Okay, so essentially it provides a life cycle, which is now clearly documented. It actually allows us to have dissolution that actually focuses, instead of just on inactivity, but actually to revive the committee and get new leadership rather than getting rid of it. If the board is actually in a mind to establish a committee, it's because they believe that it's needed. I need these committees to be working committees and not advisory boards. And so a lot of this stuff is essentially, if you're devolving some of your powers to them, they need to be able to tell you on a regular basis what they've been doing. They need to be able to access money to actually execute our program. And they need to have transparency and accountability for outcomes. So a lot of the things that are in here are essentially along the lines of just essentially, if you look at the Robert's Rules of Order, I've used the structure of a standing committee. Now, normally a standing committee is composed of board members But in this case, we're looking at committee members, and you're deliberately choosing to define per the scope some of your activity to them. And so this is why we need to get a little bit clearer about what is actually happening here. I would envisage, after this is said and done, there was some really good information in the original Committees 2.0 that needs to be part of a committee's handbook. I would encourage the committees that exist to come together to build such a handbook. But that doesn't belong in policy. We can't manage informational text to any form of standard. So it is essentially the previous policy plus granting specific rights per a scope and charter, and then basic transparency and accountability rules. It has been reviewed by a few of the board members. I've actually dealt with some comments, and also Bill Corey from the Compliance Committee has reviewed it and provided some feedback, which helped with dissolving due to committee, where is it down here? Mismanagement. He suggested that if a committee is for any reason mismanaged, the board has the power to actually dissolve or declare a part of the leadership vacant, or alternatively dissolve the entire leadership if they want to elect new ones, or alternatively dissolve the entire committee in case of just continued bad behaviour. I think that should be like an extremely last choice, because again, if the board is contemplating having a chapters committee, and chapters are a core part of our mission, I think we should always have a chapters committee, and the board should be working as far as it possibly can to recruiting new officers. The only other thing is, because some of the committees that exist at the moment predate both Committees 2.0 and this, there needs to be a transition plan. And the transition plan basically contemplates the Compliance Committee becoming one of these. And one of the things that we have a problem there is that the Compliance Committee itself is extraordinarily hard to recruit for. And so I would envisage that we would actually have some special rules which are documented in here to allow the Compliance Committee to comply with sections as they see fit or not. Because the reality is, we've had the same two Compliance Committee members who've worked incredibly hard behind the scenes. It has been very difficult to recruit new people. If Bill becomes a board member after the election, we will have to actively recruit, and I just honestly don't know who we can find to replace Bill. And we should have at least one other new member as well. So if we're going to bring all of the committees that exist now onto this plan, they just need to create a charter and then for you to approve it. And I think that'd be extraordinarily straightforward. And that's exactly what we're doing here today with the Projects Committee, which is the next vote. Beyond that, I will defer to the board for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Can you post a link to this document, please, in the
chat?
Yes. It's actually in the agenda as well, but I will definitely do it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's slightly different in the link. Okay. So unfortunately, I was out during this period. So I'll ask, can we have a sponsor? Is there a sponsor for this motion?
Sharif, can we go through it first? Like, I want to spend some time on this, if it's okay with you.
Okay. I'll be honest, I haven't seen it because I was out. So for the vote, I would have abstained. If the other board members would like to take a little bit of time to review it, then we can table this as an e-vote or for the October board meeting. Andrew, is there any time sensitivity issues with regards to this
No,
policy?
The Projects Committee, which is coming up, contemplates this not passing today. And it actually says the latest version. Its charter, which I have actually set up in light of what it says in here, would also work for the Standard Committees 2.0 as well. The chapter committee should not, sorry, not the chapter, the project committee shouldn't be held up because this is held up. I'm happy for it to be reviewed and then an e-vote or in October's meeting. It does need to happen soon because I want to be able to grant all the committees the rights to access a budget, and I want to plan budgets with them in confidence that they're going to be able to spend money.
Sure, Andrew.
Okay.
I'll need just a couple of days and then, or maybe time till Thursday.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I'll be guided by the board's decision here. As long as it's by October 25th, I can plan a budget in a month. But I would like to make sure that I can talk to the committees, and particularly the new ones like projects, about their ideas for programs. I've already had some discussions with Zoe in relation to some program budget that they want to do for career mentoring. And that's the sort of thing that we should absolutely be approving, but have a separate line item for in a budget. And we can't do that at the moment because there is no ability for a committee to hold money.
Okay. So I'll just ask for a second, but I'll make a call to have this motion raised as an e-vote at a later date. Can I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Vandana. Okay. So move on to the last two. So motion to establish a projects committee. So for this, I will gladly be the sponsor. Can I have a second?
Yeah.
I'm happy
absolutely.
to second that.
Of course.
I think Vandana won that one.
So yeah, Don, that's Vandana second. So yeah, it is it is resolved that a project committee be established under the most recent approved committee policy. Nicely done there, Andrew. With the committee purpose to provide mentorship and guidance to all OWASP projects, promote project activity, evangelize OWASP projects publicly, and advise the board or foundation on bylaw or policy changes. So we can open up the link for any discussion or any questions before a vote.
So just to let people know, this is the charter format that I'm proposing for all committees going forward, so that the board has time to review the charter before you vote, and then to make sure that the scope is well defined. My concerns with the chapters committee formation is I actually don't have a copy of their current scope. I'll need to get them to come back and either write it down based around what was pasted in the previous meeting, or ask them to come back and redo this one. But essentially it's really simple. The purpose, the scope, and who's actually forming the committee. These are the three essential items I believe that every committee should actually have.
Okay.
Should we have the roles there?
Yeah, I think it's bare minimum, right?
There are.
Oh. Okay.
I'm a bit confused, Andrew, because if this is a template charter for all committees, isn't that what we should be voting on?
No, that's not that. I'm happy to have a template charter as with the vote that's coming up next month on the committee's policy. I'll hollow this one out and make it the template for all committees to work with. But the project committee is probably one of the first to have a clear definition of what they're doing, a clear scope, and then the list of 5 people that we've actually verified are members to start the actual committee. They can then organize themselves. At the moment, Committees 2.0 contemplates that once they're formed, they will hold an election amongst themselves to determine roles, okay? I think that's a good idea because not necessarily, like people might be really energized to get a committee going, but then can't commit the time to actually do it. So I think as long as we understand who are going to be the officers of the committee, I actually have no problems with them choosing their board role, sorry, their committee roles after they've been formed. But we need 5 members to get going.
Okay. And yeah, we have 5 members in good standing, so good group.
So I wish to thank the project committee for helping me write this. It's mostly their words, and I've got them to confirm all of the bullet points as to their scope. So I'm very pleased with the work that they've done in helping promote project activity.
Okay. are there any questions with regards to this committee before we go for a vote? Going once, going twice?
One question.
Oh.
When you are making a committee, the board members or the people who are part of the committee have to be on the board call, as per my understanding, because for chapter committee, I remember that we called Sam. So I think all of them have to be on the call if we are going to approve it.
Yes, definitely.
Well,
I agree with that.
I think we just need a representation. I don't know if we need everyone.
Yes.
Yes.
The key players should be there. Yeah.
Yeah. I did invite them, but
technically they only need to be here to answer any questions we might have.
No. Yeah, so if we don't have any questions, but let me just send in the chat the policy, just to make sure that we also don't end up with death by bureaucracy. In the summary of the steps, in step number 3, which is where we are, if the previous requirement is met, the board of directors will determine whether the committee and its scope is in line with OWASP goals, and if conflicts exist with other committees. If no conflict exists, at step 4, the proposal will be discussed with the board meeting. This will involve community discussion and a vote on its formation. But it doesn't necessarily explicitly state that's there. For the chapters committee, I was the one who grabbed Sam during the call when I realized that the motion was there, but he wasn't on, well, others weren't on, and in a matter of fact, he wasn't aware. Do we still want to vote on this, or do we want to wait and have a representative of the projects to attend? Do we have any questions to ask them in the first place?
I would say that as a public board meeting and publicly acknowledge them, I think they should take the effort to come to the board meeting and present it. That would be nice.
Right. If they weren't asked, then the horse got out of the barn.
Yeah, it's our fault. Yeah. But we should learn from our past mistakes, because we had, as Fernanda says rightfully, we had the same with the chapter committee, and then we postponed it a week for giving a chance to join the next meeting.
Right. So for the future committees, Andrew, if you can ensure that there's at least one representative. But for today, I think we can move forward.
Yes, unless there's questions that can't be answered by Andrew or by whoever else is sponsoring this committee. I'm happy to move forward. I'm happy to move to a vote.
Agree.
Okay. All right. Okay, so from the order where I see everyone, Martin?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Vandana?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
And that's yes for myself.
Thank you.
Okay. And the last motion, which going forward, I think would look at the priorities. I would have put this at the top. Otherwise, we would have had risk of not making it. But motion to approve the new operational plan. So again, I'll happily sponsor this. Can I have a second, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Grant. Okay, it is resolved that the board approves that of the OWASP Foundation's 2021 operation plan and directs the foundation to publish the plan to the OWASP.org website and to start executing the plan as soon as possible, reporting back at least quarterly on progress. So, Andrew, I had a question on the operating plan based on our conversations in the previous strategy call. There were questions on the priorities of work, including Thrive.
Yes, move that forward.
This was my specific question. I did add it into the calendar.
Yes.
Just so that it's there. I saw that you commented, but do you have any feedback on this?
No, it's
and
a really good
something
idea.
that you were looking at? Yeah.
So it's a top level activity in Survive now. I moved it out of Thrive and into survive. I think this is an important aspect of what we need to achieve this coming year, starting with for example, with the AWS one, we need to have more or less a deck of activities that we can actually go forward with quickly, but also our proposition to donors. So there is actually an outstanding request that came through this morning. AWS wishes to understand what we would like to use AWS for before they go ahead and sponsor us, which would actually take out a lot of the cost associated with having a learning platform, which is one of the focus on mission areas, to host things like Secure Flag, OWASP Shop, SKF, and other great projects that we have. We're seeing a great deal of activity in Secure Flag, so our members are crying out for this. Having fundraising to help support that will actually stretch our dollars further. So it's now a survive element. So thank you for the feedback on the weekend. I've updated that.
And thank you, Andrew, for setting this up. Okay. So I'll leave the floor to the rest of the board to comment. Anyone? No. Okay.
We've done a lot of discussion of that over the last couple of weeks. So
yeah. Okay. All right. We'll go for a vote. So again, in the order where I see everyone, Martin.
Yes.
Grant.
yes.
Vandana.
Yes.
Richard.
Richard had to step away briefly, Sharif, so perhaps come back to him.
Okay. Gary.
Yes.
And it's a yes for myself. There's still a majority for this, so I think we can continue just having a conversation, but then come back to the final vote for Richard.
I just want to say something just very briefly, and thank you so much for approving that. Under normal circumstances, we would not be asking for board approval of an operating plan, but because it had strategic elements, I really appreciate the work that you did with me over the last couple of weekends to confirm many of the settings. But also next year, we'll be working together at the beginning of the year to set this foundation strategy. So the board will actually set the strategy, and then the next operating plan will adhere to that strategy, rather than asking for explicit approval. As long as the board is okay with that, I'm happy to discuss later, but thank you so much for approving this one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to hand over presentation to Emily to discuss the event strategy. So give me one tick while I stop sharing.
I just have one question. Are we just going to close the operation plan vote, Sharif, since you have the majority, or are you going to just keep it open till Richard comes back?
Keep it open to the end of the board meeting until Richard comes back. We can talk on a couple of items until he
Okay, thank
returns
you.
to the plan.
Okay, Emily. So the goal here is to present you some options. This is not the final draft. This is literally where we're heading. And if you've got questions, today is a really good idea to help Emily set the strategy, which will be coming up for a vote in the November board meeting. Emily.
Yes. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
So as Andrew said, this is our starting point. This is the what we've come up with thus far. I am looking for all of your feedback. If this ends up looking completely different next month, so be it. This is literally just what we've come up with. As you can see, if I can figure out how to advance the slide. In creating the plan, I had several goals in mind. The main one is to hold revenue generating events. And that has proved to be a little bit tricky in the virtual world. As we all know, people are really suffering from some Zoom fatigue, and it's hard to get people to actually contribute money to attend some of these events. So as you'll see as we go through this, we have several different options for offerings. We did want to diversify the offerings to appeal to a different audience, not just global diversification, but in terms of career level and everything like that. We wanted to decrease the cost for attendance, like I said, and reduce out-of-cost expenses to the foundation. So we have two plans to present. Plan A, I'll get to this later, but it does include having two globals next year, a virtual in the spring and an in-person in the fall. And I will get to that in the next slide. But the other plan is to have 3 different types of events. A lightning conference, similar to what we did in April, with a quick little 90-minute talk. Then potentially, coupling that with some other sort of activity like a career fair or a networking event that could be title sponsored by someone that could potentially give a little 10 to 15 minute talk about their company prior or after, but just a way to engage the community. That sponsorship would definitely go a long way in getting that to be a free event. The second type of event would be a 20th anniversary series. We have been toying with or kind of tossing around a bunch of ideas of how to celebrate the 20th anniversary of OWASP. Andrew came up with the idea of having sort of panels to discuss where we have been, where we're going, and doing that about 6 times next year to just, get the OWASP name out there. Again, these would be complimentary events and we would sell them as a package. So all 6 events you could sponsor. The events would be free and hopefully we could get some really good leads for the sponsors. The next would be training courses. The main idea is to take the top 5 trainings from this past year. So the 4 training events we held, take the ones, the 5 that were most well attended and run them in time zones that are friendly for APAC. We obviously took into consideration the European and American markets, but we completely neglected anybody in Australia or Asia. So we would run those at a time that would be friendly for them to attend. Additionally, we would take into consideration socioeconomic things and potentially reduce pricing for those regions as well. The Lightning Conference is free of charge. Whoops. Training would still require a fee, but again, we might go down, reduce that fee. And then again, these would be 3 packages we would sell to sponsors. So similar to something like a corporate membership, you would purchase one price, you would get the benefits for all 3 benefits being, again, leads from all of these, a potential to participate in a career fair, and then capture the swag, which is another way that they can capture leads. The virtual AppSec for Dublin, we've had a few preliminary discussions with the Dublin team. One thing we thought that would change if we did do it, another virtual, would be the price would decrease or potentially even go away. It would be a completely live event. I'm sure you all have seen the way that we're planning to run the October event, just to give us a little bit of diversity and make the event a little bit more dynamic. We thought we would decrease the number of sessions and do the entire thing live over 3 or 4 days. Again, this is the preliminary plan. This is all open for discussion. And then San Francisco, and I know we got some concerning news from all of the world today regarding the virus. However, here in Denver, they are opening meetings up to at least 500 people. And I am confident that by next fall, we would potentially be able to do a smaller meeting, working with the hotel to reduce our commitments to both room nights and food and beverage minimums. And based on new safety standards, a lot of those prices will already be reduced due to the fact we can't do things like coffee breaks and we can't do things like buffets. So we also do have the option, if you read the entire plan, I go into this in much more detail, but we do have the option to potentially do a hybrid. The only problem with that is it increases the out-of-pocket cost significantly because of the AV needs of live streaming that. For Plan A, this is my total estimated budget scenario. This does go off of hard costs, I know, like what the food and beverage might be, things like that. One thing I want to point out in both of these is that this does rely heavily on sponsorship dollars. And obviously we are going into a recession. I think we really need to think critically about how much we can actually feasibly count on from our sponsors. We're hoping to get some great data from our October event to be able to show sponsors that they're getting their money worth. But when you're going through the plan and making notes, I would love if you have any other ideas of how to reduce cost to the attendees. That would be much appreciated. Plan B is very simplified and streamlined. It includes 0 global events whatsoever. We would do 12 virtual events, and the events would still include those 20th anniversary, the lightning conference, and the trainings. All free of charge, of course, except for the trainings. And we could either sell sponsorship on an individual basis. We had talked about potentially selling each for something like $25,000 for a title sponsorship of those. Or Kelly and I discussed yesterday potentially doing it more of like a membership model. So you're purchasing a sponsorship to all 12 events. The potential budget scenario for that, again, based on what we know we can get for trainings, and then that 25,000 potential per event. A couple things to keep in mind. Obviously, we would love to present a 3-year plan. That just isn't feasible, and it's actually kind of worked in our benefit so far that we haven't had contracts or liabilities out there. We do, because we decided to cancel the Dublin contract, that has been pushed to February of 2022 with an option to move it to May for an additional 50,000 euros. Again, as we get closer, we can talk about what that looks like. We also have the opportunity to just completely cancel that contract and lose the deposit that we have put out so far. We do still have Berlin working on dates for 2023 now. They were our 2022 plan. And for North America, we really don't have any plans yet. And as I like to say, especially with our size of event, because we don't have a lot of venues that are large enough for us, and then the majority of the venues are too large for us, so they get contracted very quickly. So if we don't plan out, we are kind of subject to whenever their dates are. So eventually I would like to plan 3 years of venue contracts out. It's difficult, obviously, this year and next year due to limited travel, the inability to travel, our limited travel budget. So hopefully once things get back to normal, we can start really planning those. And I will say, site visits are essential, especially at our size with how many breakout rooms we have. A lot of times venues won't quite understand, and I don't quite understand until we actually sit down and see it. And we've actually been able to reduce our contracts significantly by me seeing the site and then being able to drop a lot of space. The other plan for 2021 and beyond is to definitely add a 3rd global. We have an experiment with Australia for 21, which I think is really exciting. They'll be doing all of the boots on the ground work and the majority of the call for papers, due to the fact that speakers obviously won't be able to travel. They have the resources in their local area to do that. And then by 2022, hopefully we can make that a full global and take a lot of that burden off of the Australia team and manage the call for papers and venue and budget and all of that. So that is the full plan in a very small nutshell. Again, this is all detailed in the full strategy. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
So for 2021, you mean it's going to be a physical event in Australia, given sort of how they're tackling the coronavirus?
That is the plan. They have the luxury of being an island, so I think they get to contain it much better than the rest of us can.
Hey, the UK is an island. We're not faring that well. Let me tell you that.
We've got
But-
too many links in and out. Heathrow makes this no longer an island, Sharif.
Right.
Yeah. So
There's a
on side,
tunnel,
I
you
just-
know. There's a tunnel.
Yeah.
There's a ton of
The, I
Oh,
do
but
want
the
to be
travel.
respectful of people's time because we are currently at time. But I'll give time for folks to ask questions. I just had one quick point of information. Is Richard back or still stepped out?
I suspect he's still stepped
yeah.
out.
Okay, so Dawn, I think given that we're at time, I would just close the vote.
Yeah.
I think it was for the operating plan that we were just waiting, but
Yep.
yeah.
So it passes 5-0.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
2
5
absent.
and maybe abstains. Yeah, 2 absent. Owen is absent. Richard would be absent because stepped out, but yeah, the motion passed. Okay, there is one other motion for adjournment with regards to October. I think we can table that as an e-vote. It just basically says that the next board meeting will be pushed earlier by week, so it's around the same time as the Global AppSec event. And with that, I think we'll just continue a little bit. If the board has any questions with regards to the event strategy, we'll obviously discuss this further in the next board meeting. And then I'll put a vote to adjourn.
I have just a
So
quick question,
I'll
Emily,
leave-
only. See on slide 8 there, it talks about the plan B. There's 120K of expenses for doing 12 virtual events. What makes up the bulk of that expense?
That is a great question, and I think that might be a typo actually, because the only expense in Plan B is the trainer expenses.
Okay.
I'm
I
sorry.
was
about
confused
that.
with 300K minus 120K being 170 anyway, but if you can work that out, I was just wondering what that was. Yeah.
Yes, sorry about that.
There's one question. In the past, the conferences next to making money and getting people together, there's also the get people together, and there was in the past the other effect of engaging more people in the area where OWASP was not so knowledgeable.
Yeah, it's just not possible right now.
Yeah, now also in the future, I think that's something that's totally left out, and I think that should also be aware of in the future when we are better, that we also reach other regions, go to the regions where we're not so settled.
I think one of the things that we're going to be trying to do is set up an events committee to run more regional events as countries become open, and we'll rely upon those to provide that social aspect. We're actually doing a careers fair and a social event in the AppSec Virtual this coming October. And we're going to see about how well a virtual social event actually works. It's a free event. People can register for that and just come. So we are trying to experiment with social things, but certainly I think we'll be relying upon countries that have managed COVID well to do regional events in their local area.
Okay.
I would encourage the board, either through me or through Emily directly, to provide feedback on which of the 2 strategies you think we should pursue. I do think there is a substantial amount of money that needs to be invested, and we wouldn't like to come to the vote in November without your input. So please do consult with us, and under normal circumstances, I'd always ask you to work directly through me, but I think in this case, I'd just slow you down. If Emily's okay with that, I'd be okay for you to talk to Emily directly.
Yes, please do. I can also share this as a Google Doc, and you can comment on that if you prefer.
Please.
I do have a question just real quick. On the Global AppSec, if, for example, we decide to lead with Plan A, which I assume is the plan, at what point can we pull back for the Global AppSec San Francisco? Like when would we know that we'd have to pull the plug depending on how COVID is going?
Yeah, that is a really, really good question. So obviously, in order for I don't know how they're doing it in Europe, but in the US, it seems to be they're doing everything on 30-day scales. So, oh, the mask mandate has been extended for 30 days. So we would have to be within that window to get out of our contract with force majeure. I think that with the times the way they are, we shouldn't worry too much about losing our deposit. I'm really thinking as convention season ramps up in the spring, we'll be able to see what the industry is doing. I would love to be able to make the call sooner than we did for San Francisco, which was 4 months out. If we could even set a deadline of May to say, okay, ABC is going forward with in-person events. Let's make this happen. Yeah, I think following what the industry is doing, not just the OWA or not just the IT community, but the larger convention industry, I think is going to be our best bet as we enter into the new year. Obviously, it's in everyone's best interest to get conventions back up and running, and I think they're going to figure out a way to do it safely. And we have the benefit of being in San Francisco, where we have a large commuter possible attendance, so people don't have to get on a plane. They don't have to necessarily even take a room. They can commute daily. So if they are concerned about travel, we have an entire population of folks 90 minutes south that can come up and still attend the conference.
I just want to highlight that refunding sponsors and changing sponsors has been a problem, and I would like to make sure that the call was made early enough that we aren't committing substantial effort to refunding and recontracting with our sponsors. It's quite a lot of work. So as much as I like the idea of May, I wouldn't like it to go too much further than May.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I'll reach out to you, Emily and Andrew, on some feedback and some of my thoughts. I was just took a second to take some notes. Okay. So with that, are there any further questions of the board? Please feel free to reach out to both Andrew and Emily at any point. Okay. With that, I'd like to raise a call to adjourn the board meeting. Can I get a second?
Yes, second.
Second. Oh.
Thank you. Okay. I'll close the recording now, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.